today in support of Budget 2018. This budget is an affirmation of the two elements which drive a healthy economy as well as a free and resilient democracy. Those are equality and growth. In his 1961 address to the UN General Assembly, President Kennedy remarked, "Conformity is the jailer of freedom and the enemy of growth." For too long, Canada has sat complacent in the face of pay disparity between men and women. For too long, Canada has continued the trend of marginalizing our Indigenous agencies. Mr. Speaker, empowering these groups will not only restore equity, but also add fuel to Canada's growing economy, which this government in Budget 2018 is prepared to do. Women represent half of Canada's population, and in their full and equal participation in Canada's economy, it's essential for our future growth. Removing the systemic barriers to women's full economic participation will support the economy and strengthen the middle class. This must start with equal pay. In Canada today, women earn 31% less than men do. To put it another way, the median income for women is $28,000 compared with $41,000 for men. The reasons behind the gender wage gap are deep-rooted and complex. Closing the gap will require leadership and a comprehensive approach involving multiple tools. One of the main causes of the gender wage gap is the underevaluation of the work that has traditionally been done by women. Requiring equal pay for work of equal value is an effective way to fix this gap. To help address this issue, the government will bring in a legislative proactive pay equity regime in federally regulated sectors, which would apply to over 1 million Canadian workers. Furthermore, we must encourage women to pursue careers in male-dominated and often better-paid red seal trades, and to ensure that women are increasingly able to model leadership to other aspiring female tradespeople. The government is allocating $19.9 million over 5 years, starting this year, to pilot an apprenticeship incentive grant for women. We must not repeat the mistakes of the past. Canada must not grow wealthy to the exclusion of Indigenous Canadians. We must advance reconciliation. And Budget 2018 makes further steps to improve the quality of life of Indigenous people in Canada, and it supports a new approach to recognizing and implementing Indigenous rights. The government proposes to invest an additional $5 billion over 5 years to ensure that Indigenous children and families have an equal chance to succeed in life, to build the capacity of Indigenous governments, and to accelerate self-determination and self-government agreements with Indigenous peoples based on the recognition and implementation of their rights. To address the funding pressures facing child and family service agencies, while also increasing prevention resources for communities so that children are safe and families can stay together, Budget 2018 proposes to provide more than $1.4 billion in new funding over 6 years, starting 2017-2018, for First Nations child and family services. We must also recognize equity between generations and the duty we have to ensure that future Canadians may enjoy the same or better environments than we do today. Canada is committed to conserving at least 17% of its land and inland waters by 2020 through networks of protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures. Both protected and conserved areas will ensure healthier habitats for species at risk and improve biodiversity. Mr. Speaker, growing the economy and protecting our environment do go hand in hand. To achieve the growth of our government has taken action. Responding to the critical and urgent need to take action on climate change, Canada's First Ministers, in consultation with Indigenous peoples, adopted the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change in December of 2016. To support the implementation of this historic national plan, the government has allocated $5.7 billion over 12 years, including $2 billion for the Low Carbon Economy Fund to combat climate change. When Canadians are at the cutting edge of technology, not just Canada, but the world stands to benefit. From the invention of insulin to the Canadarm, research in fundamental science has contributed to them all. This is why the government proposes to make significant new investments to ensure that Canada's current and future scientists and researchers have the funding and support they need to do their work. Budget 2018 proposes an investment of $3.8 billion in Canada's research system to support the work of researchers and to provide them access to state-of-the-art tools and facilities that they need to do their work. Encouraging innovation is essential to secure the fruits of the future economy. But currently, the government provides supports for all types and sizes through a vast and complicated array of programming. In an effort to make these services provided more responsive to the needs of businesses, and particular small businesses, the government has accepted the recommendation by the Advisory Council on Economic Growth. We'll be reviewing all innovation programs that serve the business community to support greater efficiency and business growth. In January, our government launched Innovation Canada to provide a single point of contact for Canadian innovators and entrepreneurs looking to grow their businesses. Linking businesses with the right programs can mean the difference between their success and failure. The Industrial Research Assistance Program is a perfect example. IRAP has helped thousands of Canadians to develop their businesses using innovative technologies and to successfully commercialize them in the global marketplace. To enable IRAP to support business research and development projects, the government proposes to invest $700 million over 5 years, starting 2018-2019, and $150 million for every year ongoing. This funding will support hardworking Canadian entrepreneurs to create jobs as they grow and expand their businesses, getting through the valley of death. Protecting and promoting Canadian intellectual property is an essential step to Canadian businesses. To accomplish this goal, Budget 2018 proposes a new intellectual property strategy to help Canadian entrepreneurs better understand and protect intellectual property and to get better access to shared intellectual property. Budget 2018 proposes to invest $85.3 million over 5 years, starting this year, with $10 million ongoing in support of the strategy. Furthermore, to better enable firms to access and share intellectual property, the government proposes to provide $30 million in 2019-2020 to pilot a patent collective. This collective will work with Canada's entrepreneurs to pool patents so that small and medium-sized firms have better access to the critical intellectual property they need to grow their business. This is proof that our government is listening to Parliament, as this was the third recommendation of the Technology Transfer Report tabled by the House Committee on Industry, Science and Technology, of which I'm honored to serve. Mr. Speaker, our plan is working. The government's efforts to support equality and growth have yielded clear results. Nearly 700,000 jobs, an ever-decreasing debt-to-GDP ratio, and ending 51 long-term boil water advisories on reserve. While this progress is laudable progress, our work is only beginning. As Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. Budget 2018 breaks the chain of conventional thinking to prepare Canada for success in the 21st century. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague opposite for his speech. Now, the government has made a big deal about this budget being a gender budget, and the words appear in the budget, I think, 360-odd times. But in terms of the actual dollars that have been put in, there's hardly anything there. And I remember being on the Special Committee on Pay Equity, and we tabled the report, and the government response was that the government would come with legislation. So it's disappointing to see that in the 2 years since then, the only thing they've done is re-announce that they're going to bring legislation and that no dollars have been put in place. In fact, if we look at where the priorities of the government are, $500 million for infrastructure, for roads and bridges in Asia, but nothing for women in Canada when 1 in 3 women are victims of violence. $5 billion for climate change, but only $20 million per year to eliminate violence against women. Why is the government all talk and no action on the gender file?
Well, member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the member from Sarnia-Lambton. I direct your attention to pages 100 to 119 of the budget, and in those pages we talk about $1.4 billion in new financing over 3 years available through BDC, in addition to an increased $200 million from $70 million of investment in women-led technology firms over 5 years through BDC's Women in Technology Fund. $250 million over 3 years through Export Development Canada to take advantages of opportunities in the global workplace to help women entrepreneurs reach their potential globally. And also supporting women in agriculture, we're creating and launching a new lending program from Farm Credit Canada to support advisory services for women. So the Capital Venture Plan also opens up the door for women to get financing through $1.5 billion in the venture capital market in Canada. So really, this is focused on helping female entrepreneurs reach their potential, to say nothing of the skills gap, and helping women with getting apprenticeships, $3,000 over 2 years plus $2,000 bonus if they achieve their goal in achieving apprenticeships in critical areas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Jonquière.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has announced very few measures for the regions of Quebec, and particularly for my riding of Jonquière. Now, I'm talking about regional industrial development here. We have a deficit when it comes to icebreakers, and that is really hurting our regional economy. But there's been no new money set aside to ensure that we will be able to fix that situation. The government brags about having a budget that will help middle-class families, but if our regional economy in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean can't expand, and if the government doesn't take any concrete measures to deal with this deficit of icebreakers, that is going to have a seriously negative effect on our regional economy and on all of the families in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean.
Or Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the honourable member across the way. Talking about regional development, the government is supporting the regional development agencies nationally and looking at a one-door approach through Innovation Canada. If you look up Innovation Canada and put in your region, your postal code, and exactly the problem you're looking for, we now have a way to direct entrepreneurs into the funding streams and into the programs that will help them, including export services through the new TCS export development programs. IRAP has increased funding. We've increased funding to IRAP with 15 new regional officers to help businesses that are trying to innovate in their fields. So through Innovation Canada, we will help Jonquière and all regions in Canada through our innovation support systems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We have time for about a 30-second question. Question et commentaire. The honourable member for Hull-Aylmer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll be very brief. I know that, like me, the member for Guelph has a particular interest in innovation, science, and technology. I'd like to know if he would like to comment on the investments in Budget 2018 that were made in Canadian universities in terms of research and innovation.
30 seconds or less, please.
Thank you, and thank you to the member. And yes, we do share a passion there. It was so good to see that research finally taking a gain through this budget. Research has been denied access to funding for years through the previous government. Now we've opened up the door to researchers to help with primary research, leading to growth in our economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.